everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about Taurus, the second sign in the zodiac. I already did a video about Aries, so if you're interested, check it out. And I'm planning to work through all of the signs in order. So, Taurus is the second sign in the zodiac. It is an earth sign, along with Virgo and Capricorn. It is a fixed sign, along with Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And since there's only one sign of each modality, cardinal, fixed, or mutable, for each element, Taurus is the only fixed earth sign in the zodiac. Fixed signs are stable, constant, unchanging. Earth signs are practical, down to earth, oriented in the physical, material world. Taurus, as a fixed earth sign, is physically present. It's oriented towards the senses. It's unchanging in its opinions and preferences. It seeks material security. It seeks physical comfort. It seeks beautiful, luxurious things. There's like a really artistic side to Taurus, but we'll get to that more, especially when we get to the modern significations of Taurus. The symbol for Taurus is the bull, and the glyph looks like a bull's horns. Zodiac doesn't actually line up with the constellations in our present day, which is fine. We're not talking about the constellations when we're doing astrology. We're talking about the zodiac in terms of dividing the sky into 12 equal portions and those being represented by the different zodiac signs. And like the constellations aren't even all the same size as each other anyway, so it's not really relevant. But if you wanted to look into the sky and say, like, oh, the moon is in Taurus, like, look, there's the moon, that must be the constellation Taurus. No, it actually wouldn't be. It would be the constellation of Aries. So just pointing that out. The planetary ruler of Taurus is Venus. So Taurus is the zodiac sign in which Venus has its domicile along with Libra. Venus has domicile over two different signs. Every planet has two signs that it is the ruler of, except for the moon and the sun, which each have one. And each planet also has one sign that is exalted in, and the moon is exalted in Taurus. And when we get to the ancient sources, we'll see that they specifically said that the moon was exalted at 3 degrees of Taurus. But that means that the moon is particularly strong and it has the resources it needs to be able to thrive and do its job well when it is in Taurus. And each planet has, like I said, that one sign that they're exalted in, and that's the Taurus for the moon, and then one or two signs that each planet rules, and Venus rules Taurus and Libra. So just to sum it up. And now we're going to talk about the dates for Taurus. All right, so the exact dates of Taurus, as in the dates that the sun enters and leaves Taurus, are slightly different from year to year, depending on the leap year, depending on where you live. If you want to look and see specifically what day and time the sun enters Taurus, I'm going to show you how to do that on AstroSeek. I did already go over this in the Aries video, but I'll show you again for this one. Generally speaking, the sun enters Taurus on April 19th or 20th, and it leaves Taurus and enters Gemini on May 20th or 21st. And so we're going to look at AstroSeek here, which is a great website for a lot of different things. But I'm going to show you how you would find just like a list of when a planet enters all the different signs, or when a planet enters specifically one sign over and over again over history, like over a period of time, so you can see like all the dates. So you go to astroseek.com, you go to free horoscopes up here in the top left, go down to the bottom of this drop down list of options here, and you have various astrology calculations. You click that. Then you look at event calculation, returns, and ingresses, and ingress just means like entering a sign. So you have direct ingresses, and then you have ingresses and returns into a particular sign. So you would use direct ingresses if you want to see, like, I want to see all the dates that the sun is switching signs throughout the course of the year. Or if you want to see over a course of, say, 10 years, all the different dates that the sun entered Taurus each year. Then you would do for the particular sign one, ingresses and returns for a particular sign. You do the sun entering into Taurus, and then we'll just say over the past 10 years or so, calculate. Then you can see the 20th and the 19th, and there's no real pattern, but you can see that it's generally one or the other. So that is how you do that. All right, so now we're going to talk about Taurus in modern sources, what people think of when they think of Taurus today. And first, we'll look at some of the archetypes associated with Taurus. Some of these I may have made up, but they work for me. Most of them I think you could probably find if you looked at a bunch of different sources online or in books. Some of them are definitely ones you'll see over and over, like the farmer. That's one that comes up a lot. And also, along with that, like the gardener, I think is another, or the cultivator. Like there's a bunch of different ways you could think about it. Um, Someone who makes things grow, someone who works with the earth, right? The musician, the master craftsman, the artist, the connoisseur, the creator, the builder, the gatherer, the collector, and the earth mother. Those are all some archetypes that help to think about all the different ways that Taurus can manifest for a person. Um, let's see. So, other like Taurus characteristics. And I just want to point out that everybody has Taurus somewhere in their chart. And we're going to talk in a little bit after I go over the ancient sources. We're going to talk about how, depending on your rising sign, Taurus will show up in a different part of your chart. And whether or not you have planets in that sign, its energies are still affecting that area of your life. And if you do have planets in a sign, it matters what planets they are for how comfortable they'll be in Taurus and how they will express themselves in Taurus, as well as the other things going on in your chart and how they are interacting with that planet. So you might have your sun in Taurus, but if everything else in your chart is kind of at odds with that, then it might not show up in typical Taurian ways. And you might have multiple planets in Taurus and really resonate with some of these characteristics, while other ones don't come through for you so much, but that's okay. I mean, nobody is like 100% one sign in any sense of the word. Everybody is every sign somewhere in their life, somewhere in their chart, it is showing up for them. So we're thinking about Taurus as a general energy, as a force within a chart, more than like Taurus as a person, because nobody is one sign. Okay. So now that I laid that out, and like I'm also going to go over some, sorry, I keep interrupting myself, but I'm going to go over some famous people's charts that have the sun in Taurus, as well as either Mercury or Venus in Taurus as well. And even for my example, Salvador Dali, that had Sun, Mercury, and Venus in Taurus, and actually he had Mars in Taurus too, I believe. Um, Even with somebody with all four of those planets in Taurus, his Aries moon is pulling some weight. Like you can still see that other force coming through that's like, getting him to do things a little differently than what you might think of for Taurus. So I just want to throw that out there. So anyway, Taurus characteristics: stable, practical, grounded, stubborn, definitely stubborn, artistic, musical, creative, cautious, earthy, in tune with nature, patient, constant, sustaining. Once determined to do something, super hard worker, easygoing, a peacekeeper, but like if they dig their heels in about something, then they can be very strong-headed, strong-willed, inflexible. Strong in general is a good word for Taurus. Resilient, uh, comfort seeking or preferring to be in their comfort zone, hates to be rushed. Definitely don't rush someone with a lot of Taurus energy. Slow to act, slow and steady. See, there's different ways to phrase it where it has a different uh, connotation, I guess, but it all works for Taurus. Dislikes change, definitely. Um, Opinionated, strong willed, strong feelings about their preferences, clothes, food, environments, music, etc. High standards can be something that comes up. Sensual, affectionate, definitely like physically affectionate, a lover of luxury. Not a fan of spontaneity that goes along with not liking change, I think. Very attached and loyal, although some people will tell you clingy and possessive. It all depends on how it expresses for that particular person. Also, that like people change in different times in their life too. So, like what comes through is a certain manifestation in one part of your life may come through in a different way if you like work on it or find yourself in a different situation. So seeking financial security and stability, building foundations, um, thrifty, um, liking to plan ahead and be prepared, which I think goes along with that, not liking sudden change. So, it's one way to cope with that is to be prepared and to plan ahead for upcoming inevitable change. So that is Taurus in modern sources. All right, so now we're going to look at some of the ancient sources on Taurus. First, Phidias Valens. He's probably my favorite. He wrote this between his anthology between 150 to 175 AD, and this excerpt is from the translation from Greek by Mark Riley. If some of the things in some of the ancient sources seem a bit extreme, that was just how they wrote. I think that there was, first of all, more that their lives were probably more challenging and that they faced more extreme circumstances. But also, I think it was just a teaching tool too, because if you show the extreme of the possibilities, positive or negative, for any given situation, then you can kind of infer that there's also middle grounds. And of course, they always talk about mitigations and ways that things balance out other things. And so by giving the extreme examples of good and bad in the ancient sources, their students could kind of infer that that was the range that we were talking about, right? So um, you don't have to, I mean, of course, some things are in astrology will come out very literally, but if something sounds really intense, just remember that they also were aware that it would not always turn out that way. Okay, so Taurus is feminine, solid, lying in the sun spring tropic, full of bones, with some limbs missing, rising backwards, setting straight down. This sign is productive of order. Earthy, rustic, related to farming, a freed man, downward trending, with few offspring, semi vocal and mute, noble, invariable, energetic and unfinished, indicative of estates and possessions. The ecliptic lies to the north, rising in line with its highest point. Men born under this sign are noble, energetic, toilsome, good at keeping things, pleasure loving, music loving, generous. Some are laborers, propagators, planters. If benefics incline toward this place, or if the house ruler is favorably situated, men become priests and school superintendents, as well as those judged worthy of crowns and of the purple, of monuments and statues, also supervisors of temples, and distinguished and brilliant individuals. So really that's not anything too terrible in there, but when we get to some of the later sources, you'll see what I'm talking about. All right, so here's a little more from Valens. I couldn't fit it all together. I also wanted to show you what the book looks like if you're looking online for it. It's Phidias Valens, the anthology, translated by Mark T. Riley. Very good. Okay, Valens on the terms of Taurus. So each sign could be split into what is referred to usually now as the Egyptian bounds. Valens called them the terms, and they are not equal divisions of the sign. And it is somewhat hard to tell how they came up with what planet rules each division, but it's still very interesting. So the first 8 degrees of Taurus belongs to Venus, prolific with many children, moist, downward trending, convicted, hating their children. The next 6 degrees belong to Mercury, intelligent, sensible, criminal, with few offspring, sinister, fatal. The next 8 degrees belong to Jupiter, good, great-hearted, bold, lucky, ruling and beneficent, magnanimous, temperate, loving modesty. The fourth term, the next 5 degrees, belong to Saturn, sterile, barren, a eunuch, a vagabond, censorious, theatrical, gloomy, toilsome. And the final 3 degrees belong to Mars, masculine, tyrannical, fiery, harsh, murderous, a looter of temples, and a criminal, not an unknown one, rather destructive and short-lived. Also, Valens pointed out that the moon is exalted at 3 degrees of Taurus specifically. I did mention that before. And he associates Taurus with the neck, face, gullet, eyebrows, and nose. Right, the next source that I want to look at is Paul of Alexandria. He wrote this introduction in about 378 CE, and it was translated from Greek by James Holden. The second sign is Taurus, feminine, fixed, verbal, domicile of Venus, exaltation of the moon around 3 degrees, fall of none, meaning that, this is me, not him, meaning that whatever sign a planet is in is exalted in, the opposite sign, which for Taurus would be Scorpio, would be its fall. And it's saying that none of the planets are in their fall in Taurus. That's what Paul is saying here. So, triplicity by day of Venus and by night of the moon. It lies in the climate of Babylonia, having been assigned to Notos, the south wind. It rules the neck and tendons. The sign rises from the invisible into the visible part of the world in 1 2/3 hours, or 1 hour and 40 minutes, or 25 times, 25 degrees, in the climb mentioned. So he's talking about the rising time because even though people will say that it takes 2 hours for the rising sign to change, implying that each sign rises in about 2 hours, it isn't actually true. Some signs rise faster or slower than other signs. And so he's saying specifically for Taurus, it's 1 2/3 hours. Right, this is going to be the last ancient source that we look at, and that's Firmicus Maternus Mathesis, translated from Latin by Benjamin Dykes. And Firmicus Maternus was born around 270 CE. He wrote this book probably in the 330 CE, so he's a bit older for that time. He was a lawyer who gave up practicing law. In the introduction to Mathesis, Benjamin Dykes says that he gave it up in disgust. And he practiced astrology in his later years, and he promised to write this book about astrology for a friend, and then finally did it and realized just how much work it was. And it's a huge book. So some of the things, there are sections in the book that were missing, unfortunately. Like, there's a section in the book where he talks about what was it? It was like the moral qualities and nature of the signs. And unfortunately, we're missing a bunch of the sections. We only have like Aries and Pisces, or maybe not even all of Pisces for that section. So we don't have everything that he originally wrote about Taurus. But we do have some things such as Saturn in Taurus, Jupiter in Taurus, the hour marker, which is like the ascendant in Taurus, and some basic qualities. So I just wanted to go over those really quickly. And if you're getting sick of the ancient sources, although I don't know why you would, they're pretty cool. But if you are, I'm going to be moving on pretty soon to a bunch of other stuff, so stick with me. All right, so Firmicus Maternus on Taurus. Taurus is the feminine domicile of Venus. So he talks about how each planet that has two domiciles, one of them will be a masculine, that's what they traditionally said, masculine sign, and one will be a feminine sign. You could also think of them as diurnal and nocturnal signs. There's a bunch of different ways to label that distinction, I guess, if you don't like feminine and masculine, but what Firmicus Maternus called it was the feminine domicile of Venus. The moon is exalted at 3 degrees of Taurus, and he also points out that it's dejected at 3 degrees of Scorpio. The 3 decans of Taurus, so that would be if you were to take the zodiac sign of Taurus and split it into 3 10-degree segments. The first one is ruled by Mercury, the second by the moon, and the third by Saturn. Taurus and all of the earth signs, or the earth triplicity, are subject to the south winds. The 12th parts of Taurus, which would be 2.5-degree divisions of the sign. He points out, he like has a whole chart and everything, but he talks about how the first 12th part is Taurus, and then the second is Gemini, and you go through, so that if you were looking at like the third 2.5-degree division, then you would say it was the Cancer of Taurus. Or if you were to look at the last 2.5-degree section, like say you were talking about 29 degrees Taurus, then the 12th part it would be in would be the Aries of Taurus. So Firmicus also discusses Anticia, but he calls it shadow degrees, which as a name makes a lot of sense because it's talking about the shadows cast at the solstice and points in the zodiac where the shadows are equivalent. Those points also, the Antician point degrees, are also places where the sun will rise and set at exactly the same location, only at those degrees. So those pairs are really powerful. And for a lot of the signs in Anticia, it is one of the only ways that they are able to connect. So it's like a way to find a relationship between those two signs because they are otherwise in inversion. They can't see each other. But the exception is Taurus is in Anticia or sends a shadow degrees to Leo. And obviously they're already square each other. So it is an exception in terms of those two signs already do have a relationship to each other. But the way that it works is that the degrees of each sign to be in Anticia, they need to add up to 30. So it wouldn't be like 10 degrees of Leo is in Anticia or sending shadow degrees to 10 degrees of, I can't remember which one I said, but 10 degrees of Taurus and 10 degrees of Leo don't match up. Instead, what it is like 10 degrees of Taurus and 20 degrees of Leo, or the other way around, or 1 degree of Taurus and 29 degrees of Leo. Like those would be Antician degrees. So that is Firmicus Maternus. We're going to talk a little bit. I'll just quickly go over some of the other things in the book because it's pretty cool. All right, so this will be a good example of what I meant by some of the ancient sources being seemingly overly negative at times. But I think it's really interesting. And certain parts of it also might really stand out to you throughout your astrological studies or practice. As being interestingly relevant in weird ways as you encounter people with certain placements. So, Firmix Maternus on Taurus rising, from a thesis translated by Benjamin Dykes. If the hour marker were found in Taurus, he will be wearied by many series of labors, and whatever he had gotten at an early age, he will always lose. But afterwards, what he had lost will be healed up with an increase of happiness, and he will have the adornment of good pickiness, and he will see his enemies struck down in a succession of miserable humiliations. If the midheaven were in Aquarius, and this is just me making an aside, just because your rising sign is Taurus, it doesn't mean that your midheaven will necessarily be in Aquarius. It has to do with where in the world you are. But if the midheaven were in Aquarius, he will always spend time with more powerful people because of friendship, and he will always have a life from public actions, and he will always be involved in watery business matters and be one who is never struck with the envy of accusation. Of course, he will have both the increases of resources equally with losses. If the setting, or the descendant, were found in the sign of Scorpio, he will be shrewd in every social relationship of life, supporting himself on another's duty of management. He will lose his first wife through the intervention of death, but if the native was a woman, she will equally lose her husband and son. If the lower heaven were found, so I see, were found in Leo, it will make those seeking the supports of patrimony through their own labor and who obtain the greatest resources of assets from their own people by means of various kinds of plots, but whose assets will endure with them in a state, I can't see it, in a state of perpetual pickiness. But these things are decreed according to the measure of the nativity. So it is an extreme delineation for different things, like the woman losing her husband and son just because her descendants in Scorpio. Like, obviously, that's not how it always works out, and they knew that. Like, they were well-educated writers, but by providing these extreme examples and then showing different mitigations, they could trust their students to infer the middle ground that was available. All right, Firmicus Maternus on Jupiter in Taurus, and I'm just doing select parts of this, like excerpts, because there was so much. So definitely check out this book if you want to read the whole section. Um, there is more to be read. So, whoever had Jupiter in Taurus will be in the greatest glory and the greatest powers, for in the first time they'll be shaken by this grave storm of dangers, for they will abide in illness, servitudes, and lawsuits. Sometimes more powerful contention, sometimes losses, labors, or injuries are decreed. But after they have been oppressed, they will have prosperous outcomes to all business affairs. Sometimes there are allotted glories, sometimes the friendship of powerful people, sometimes powerful men hand over the secrets of their life to them. However, they will be just, strong, exhibiting love to friends. They will be free in their speech. They will strongly make exceptions for friends. Of course, they will be rash, forceful in every contention of contest, and those who never desire success for themselves but always for their friends. They will be beneficial to many, having the greatest trappings of luckiness. But he decrees all these things according to the measure of the nativity. So again, it matters what else is going on in the chart. And the very last section of Firmicus Maternus that I want to go over is Saturn in Taurus. If Saturn were found in Taurus, those who had him thus will thrive in their actions through their own powers, but they will diminish whatever they received in their first age. And by themselves, they seek the great resources of assets for themselves. But in the first period of youth, they are weighed down by various types of unevenness and will be under other people, and will flatter more powerful men by reason of necessity. In their first age, they will have difficult times, and in those times, they will be fatigued by heavy sluggishness and will suffer narrow straits due to a lack of necessities. In their first age, they will even labor with the soreness of burning wounds and be hampered by certain defects, but the greatest ones, and oppressed by great illness, and being freed of those risks of troubles, they will achieve a long length of life. Of course, they obtain the greatest trappings of luckiness through their own powers and own merit, but they are pressed down by the burden of unluckiness for as long as Saturn will have completed the first circuit of his course. And I think that has to do with the Saturn return, and we're talking about like the first circuit being that first path around, first orbit around the chart, and then returning and then getting through that first course. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to think about, depending on your rising sign, where Taurus falls in the chart for you. So everyone has Taurus somewhere, whether or not you have planets in it, it somehow is affecting an area of your life just through the energy of Taurus. And so you need to know your birth time to know your rising sign. And then once you know your birth time, you can run a chart on pretty much any free site like that AstroSeek site that I already showed you. And then you can look for the little bull glyph. Like here, it's up in the 10th house in this chart, and that is where Taurus is showing up for you. So this example chart shows Leo rising and Taurus falling in the 10th house. So we're going to just talk about what it means to have Taurus in different houses, what that relationship between Taurus and the rising sign therefore could mean, different questions you can ask to sort of think about it in your own life or for other people. And because anybody that has Leo rising has Taurus as their 10th house. So it's like if you're using whole sign houses. So there's like something fundamental to that relationship and the way that it shows up in the chart. So we're just going to run through really quickly the different houses and how that shows up. And there really aren't right answers or right questions. It's just a matter of thinking about it and what it means to you and why you think it works out that way and how that tends to work out in people's lives, having this relationship, regardless of planetary placements or aspects or anything like that that's going on. Additionally, that will obviously have a really big impact on the person. All right, so we're just going to go through this in zodiacal order. If you have Aries rising, then Taurus falls in your second house. How is Taurus a fuel for Aries rising? Well, if you think about how Aries needs to go its own way and needs to seek new independent ways to do things, Taurus fuel is powerful. Like Taurus is an unstoppable force once it decides to do something, and Aries needs that because otherwise it can burn out. If Aries can find some of that Taurus determination to see things through to the end, then Aries is almost unstoppable. Why does Aries need Taurus? Well, Taurus can stick with things, like we said. Taurus also waits before deciding to do something. As we'll see when we go through the different signs and I make these videos, the sign of your second house offers something that your rising sign is likely to have some trouble accessing. The 12th and the second sign are signs that the first house, the rising sign, can't see. They're very different from that rising sign, and there's like something to be gained from learning how to incorporate those energies into your life. So Taurus definitely has a lot to offer to Aries. How does Aries find value in Taurus? Aries is driven to succeed. Taurus may take its time, but it's well equipped to succeed in the end. It may take a while to start something, but its total determination to successfully complete a project once it starts it is unstoppable. Aries also wants to be unstoppable. So, how are Aries earning and spending habits like Taurus? Well, when Aries wants to do something, it does it. And so there can be like that sense with Taurus of like stubbornness and of like, um, this is my money, so I'm going to do what I want with it, basically. And you can see that relationship with Aries rising. And Taurus also wants to be materially very comfortable. It wants to spend money on the things that it likes and it wants. Aries and Taurus are two of the more me-centered signs, and that can show up, I think, for people, especially in how they spend and how they earn and spend their money, and what they value, all second house topics. Firmicus Maternus and what he had to say about it. Um, but just like really quickly, thinking about Taurus rising, that means that Taurus is your first house of the self, the body, the personality, your image, your path in life, your journey, the kind of journey that you're on. Taurus rising folks are on a journey of embracing and communing with the physical world. They're on a creative journey of the senses. Taurus rising is also the path of learning to be present. Some of the most stereotypical Taurus qualities could be especially apparent in Taurus rising people, such as the creativity, the need to go their own speed, dislike of being rushed, the initially easygoing attitude that can kind of you can realize is actually covering intense stubbornness and a dislike of change. And Taurus rising people are very down to earth, probably connected to earthy things in some way. Do they work with the earth or in the senses some way? Like, do they cook? Do they make art or music? Something like that. Um, they're probably very clear on their likes and dislikes, and they seek comfort, pleasure, beauty, consistency. That is Taurus rising. And if you have Taurus rising, then the ruler of your chart is Venus. All right, so if you have Gemini rising, Taurus falls in the 12th house. How is Taurus a mystery for Gemini? Like this 12th house sign is something that's hard for Gemini to access. Well, Gemini seeks change, new things, new people, new ideas. None of that's natural for Taurus. Taurus wants consistency and stability, and that's a mystery to Gemini. Taurus wants to do things slowly, see things through to the end. Gemini likes to do things quickly and flit around from idea to idea or task to task like a butterfly. Like they might circle back, they probably will circle back, but they don't want to have to do it all at once. Gemini loves ideas and conversation. Taurus is much more rooted in the physical, things you can touch. Learning to access your 12th house sign can be really important for growth and balance as we move through life, but it's not easy. It takes time. Another way to view the 12th house sign is how is it a break or escape for the rising sign? Can Gemini wear itself out, jumping from idea to idea? Can focusing on one physical task at a reasonable pace be a way for Gemini to meditate, find peace, get a break from its own restlessness just for a bit? And if you have Cancer rising, then Taurus is in the 11th house. How does Cancer seek Taurus in a group setting? Cancer rising is on a journey to nurture and protect the tribe. It wants the tribe to remain stable and secure, which is very Taurus. It's also easier to protect a tribe that is slow moving and unchanging. Another way of looking at the oh, and also want to point out too, like how loyal and dependable Taurus is. I don't even think I've mentioned that yet. Like Laura, like Taurus is going to be where they say they're going to be. And that is so important for Cancer that wants this tribe to remain steady and stable and safe. So, another way of looking at the 11th house is that of hopes and good fortune. How does Cancer rising hope for Taurus? How does it find good fortune in Taurus? Being able to find physical pleasure and comfort and presence in the current moment can be so important and grounding for a sign that is so changeable because like Cancer is ruled by the moon. So there's like that changing, fluctuating nature to Cancer, and being able to hope for that kind of consistency and like steadiness of Taurus makes a lot of sense for such a changeable sign as Cancer. There's also something truly sentimental and nostalgic about Cancer rising, where it hopes to create tribes that look backwards toward things that felt good and safe in the past. And Taurus is about holding on to those things that bring you the feeling of comfort. So it makes sense for Cancer to hope for a sign that holds on so tightly to the things that it loves. All right, so if you have Leo rising, then Taurus falls in the 10th house. So since there's that fixed energy in the ascendant, then you know that the 10th house is also going to have that same modality, so it's also a fixed sign. Um, with Leo risings, there's they're on this path to shine in life, and there needs to be that public role of really being determined to be the self. Taurus is a public face for Leo because Leo can best shine by being consistently itself and not changing itself for other people. And Taurus will not change itself for other people. So there's also that creative side to Leo, and Taurus is like creative and like especially good at like really putting in the hard work to master their craft and like really putting in that time and dedication. And Leo is just like meant to shine and express itself. So that combination of being able to put in the time and the work to be able to best shine, um, it's a perfect combination, really. So, you know, if Leo wants to get the acclaim and recognition that it desires, it needs to be willing to put in that hard Taurian work. All right. So with Virgo rising, Taurus is in the 9th house. Virgo, how is Taurus like what Virgo believes in? How does Virgo encounter the world through Taurus? These are different ways you can think about the relationship. Virgo rising believes and encounters the world through Taurus because Virgo rising is seeking purity and order and is on this path of service, but like in a really practical way, really like hands-on, down to earth kind of service to the world. And the belief that that is an essential part of life. And the Taurus belief in the inherent beauty, value, and worth of the physical world keeps Virgo grounded and trying to improve the world in practical ways. Virgo believes it's important to do the job right and learns about the world in a slow, focused, grounded Taurian way. Taurus teaches Virgo rising to appreciate the little things. The school of Taurus. So you can think about like how does Virgo rising go to the school of Taurus, right? So the school of Taurus is about making things grow slowly and with focus, about becoming a master in your craft. Virgo loves being a master at something, right? And Virgo rising can learn how to find beauty in the details by studying Taurus. So, everyone always talks about Virgo being so detail oriented, and like people will talk about it as though it's a bad thing, right? Like you're being too picky, too focused on the details. But with this belief in Taurus or going to the school of Taurus, you see the beauty in the details. You see the beauty in the present moment. Like Taurus is so great at that. Virgo rising's attention to detail and selfless nature means it can truly help others in tangible ways. And Taurus teaches Virgo how to stay determined, how to follow through, the earthy pleasures that are worth fighting for everyone to be able to enjoy. With Libra rising, Taurus falls in the 8th house. How is Taurus the death of Libra? That's an interesting one since they're both Venus signs. But think about how Libra's journey is to find balance, harmony, peace. Think about that Taurian ability to dig your heels in and refuse to change, or sometimes refuse to try something new. Taurus can seem really easygoing at first, and there's like that Venusian nature to that. And of course, you could have other placements that would, or helpful aspects that lessen the stubbornness or resistance to change overall. But at its essence, Taurus is not the go-to energy for finding the compromise and peace that Libra seeks. Libra is also on a journey of seeking relationship, seeking connections to others, and so on. Taurus can be very set on what it wants and needs and likes. So for Scorpio rising, Taurus falls in the 7th house of partnership and marriage. If you are a Scorpio rising, you're on a journey of seeking that which is beneath the surface, investigating and seeking answers. You're on a journey of learning to merge with others in a healthy way. Taurus is the partner to Scorpio because Taurus is dependable and unchanging. Taurus can be trusted by Scorpio, which isn't always easy for Scorpio rising. Taurus is all about the physical, sensual pleasure of life and ruled by Venus, and Scorpio wants deep emotional connection and is ruled by Mars. And I mentioned this in the Aries video with Libra as a partner to Aries, but again, with that Scorpio and Taurus, there's something powerful about these Mars and Venus signs combining in relationship. All right, Sagittarius rising means that Taurus falls in the 6th house. And the 6th house can be about work and health, but it can also be about like your daily practice, like the work that is like really important in your daily life. So, Sagittarius rising. How does Taurus make Sagittarius sick? That's one way to look at it because the 6th house can be about illness and injury. Well, if you think of the range of Sagittarius, and also because they're in aversion to each other, the 1st and the 6th house. So it's like there's like something that's difficult to connect between those. So how does Taurus make Sagittarius sick? Well, if you think of the range of Sagittarius archetypes, how they combine with Taurus, Taurus can perhaps lead Sagittarius to overindulge in the name of exciting new experiences, but also just in general, Sagittarius wants to do new things, see new things, learn new things. And if Sagittarius rising has a really heavy 6th house Taurus placement, there's going to be this energy holding them back from their Sagittarius mission because Taurus doesn't want to necessarily do the new things or go to the new places, doesn't want to change. Sagittarius wants to grow and expand. Another way to look at it, and this is my favorite way to look at it, is how is Taurus a daily practice for Sagittarius? This is a really interesting one. If you think of the Sagittarius types who are more in their heads, maybe like the professor type, the hermit type, then Taurus is a daily practice of reconnecting with the body and the physical world, appreciating the tangible and the sensual, not getting too lost in the world of ideas and philosophy and so on. With Capricorn rising, Taurus falls in the 5th house. Capricorn rising is on this journey to create tangible success and build things that last. And Taurus creates Capricorn because of that focus on the physical material world and that desire for security and stability that drives Capricorn rising to achieve and succeed and be the boss. Taurus is where Capricorn has fun because Capricorn rising needs to find ways to enjoy themselves in the present moment in the world as it is here and now, not to get too lost in future plans. So that is both how Capricorn rising can have fun through Taurus, but also how it is created, like Taurus creates Capricorn, but also Capricorn gives birth to Taurus because Capricorn is trying to create something stable that will last, and Taurus is all about that stability. All right, so for Aquarius rising, Taurus is in the 4th house. And how is Aquarius rooted in Taurus? How does Aquarius feel at home in Taurus? Aquarius may be the questioner and the agent of social change, but is also a fixed Saturnian sign. It needs its home to be stable and consistent. It can try to change the outer world if it has a safe, unchanging home to retreat to. Aquarius rising can be very set on its ideas. This includes its ideas about what makes a home. So once it knows what it wants in a home, it's very likely to stick with it. And it will probably stubbornly resist anyone else's ideas about what it should do at home, who it should live with, etc. So a totally different perspective is, how is Taurus the parent of Aquarius? How does Aquarius come from Taurus? Well, if you consider the traditional and stubborn side of Taurus, or the side that's focused on material pleasures, well, isn't that something that Aquarius would rebel against? Doesn't Aquarius need something to rebel against? Or if you think about Taurus as the sign that can represent those with like an extravagant lifestyle, Aquarius rising in its humanitarian nature could also be a direct reaction against that. So that is, and it's another example also of how the angular houses will be the same modality in whole sign houses, so that if you have a fixed rising sign like Aquarius, then you also have a fixed sign as the fourth house. All right, so with Pisces rising, Taurus falls in the third house of communication and community. How does Pisces find community in Taurus? Well, my first thought when I was running through this was like, since they're both pretty artistic, I was thinking about, and creative, I was thinking about like, back to earth, like hippie artistic commune sort of thing. But besides that, Pisces benefits from being surrounded by people who can bring it back down to earth, remind it to be present here and now. Um, and that ties in also with, how does Taurus help Pisces to communicate? Well, Pisces can be dreamy and a bit distractible. Um, and Taurus can bring Pisces back into the moment, so that Pisces can really process what's going on and communicate as well. And I've known a few Pisces risings. I've raised some who are sometimes best brought back into the conversation through like physical touch, like, putting a hand on a kid's shoulder and then like I get their attention, like that sort of thing. And Taurus is all about that physical touch. But then also there's like that level of like artistic communication that I think that Pisces rising could really utilize that in a powerful way. And I also think that there's like a speed component, like Pisces is happy to go his own speed, is almost outside of time and schedules and such. And Taurus refuses to be rushed. So Taurus, as like a way of communicating, allows Pisces the freedom to ignore the expectation to go quickly. And yeah, I think that that is a really nice combination. So, if your sun is in Taurus, then there are 15 possible combinations of the signs that your Mercury and Venus could be in, because Mercury can only be in Taurus or the neighboring signs of Aries and Gemini, and Venus can only go up to two signs away in either direction. So, it could be in Aries, but it could also be in Pisces, and it could be in Gemini, or it could also be in Cancer, and of course, it could also be in Taurus with the sun. So that adds up to 15 possible combinations of those three planets' signs, and with the sun in Taurus. And I'm not going to go over all 15. I found an example, one famous example of each combination. And I'm just going to go through the charts of and just give some basic biographical information about the first seven, which are the people that have at least two of those three planets in Taurus, so that we can see like that Taurus energy coming out in different ways for different people, and how that third planet being in a different sign can affect it. So yeah, we're just gonna look through real quick. All right, so for an example of somebody with the Sun, Mercury, and Venus in Taurus, we have Salvador Dali, the artist, although actually he also had Mars in Taurus. And you will see that there are a lot of Taurian characteristics that come up in his life and in his work. Um, One thing that I noticed when I was looking at different articles about him was one referred to him as a master craftsman, and I was really excited to see that. It was like 1 point for astrology, because I had already come up with that as like a great archetype for Taurus, so I was pretty happy to see that. So, according to Wikipedia, food and eating have a central place in Dali's thoughts and work. He associated food with beauty and sex. In the article about Dali on Britannica, it describes how his surrealist art was centered on everyday objects combined with the erotic and eventually with the religious as well. And the physical material world, as well as the sensual or the erotic, are important themes for Taurus. But there's also that traditional aspect of Taurus that can show up in relation to religion or ideas and just traditionalism in general. In fact, I found one quote by Dali saying, I have always claimed and still claim that the ideas of surrealism will only work or will work only when they are painted to perfection and in a traditional manner. So that's so Taurian of him. I see the Taurus and traditionalism connection reflected in the Taurus association with the Hierophant tarot card also. And I also think it has to do with the unchanging nature of Taurus as well. So Dali did become increasingly focused on Catholicism as he got older. He also, this here's like a more difficult negative manifestation of that Taurian stubborn traditionalism, is that he refused to denounce fascism. And in fact, in later life, pretty openly supported it. And I'm not going to get into that here too much. I just wanted to point out that his like stubborn refusal to do this, to denounce fascism, got him into trouble with other surrealists. He lost friendships over it. It was just he ironically thought they were the stubborn ones. And he even said, instead of stubbornly attempting to use surrealism for purposes of subversion, it's necessary to try to make of surrealism something as solid, complete, and classic as the works of museums, which, so Taurus, right? But like, I guess this is just a pretty good example of how sometimes that refusal to change or to let go of an idea or a way of being can be a really negative thing for Taurus as well. So, back to the art. All right. So the title of one of his most famous works was The Persistence of Memory, which makes me think of Taurus as well. Its ability to hold on to the past, hurts, and difficulty starting over. Um, there's also that like association with Taurus and luxury. And in this one article that I read, I think it was 2016, it mentioned that that painting was the most valuable surrealist painting ever sold at auction at 22.4 million. Maybe something else has been sold for more since then, but still like that association with this being like this like super valuable piece of art that also feels very Taurian. In the painting, it's like the one with the melting clock, and it's just like all these like basic everyday objects, and then there's this like beautiful natural landscape, and that associate Taurus is also associated with the natural world, and he would have these vivid natural landscapes in the background. Um, Even the animals that he chose to appear in his work feel very Taurian to me. Also, like elephants, rhinos, donkeys, ants, like that, like hardworking ant vibe, right? Locusts, even snails, like they're all so Taurus. Like it's pretty funny actually. And so they're all like animals that work hard and either individually or as a part of a collective can accomplish great things or achieve some kind of brute force, but they're also animals that work at their own pace and in their own time. So yeah, just kind of a funny collection. And he was also an author, filmmaker, set designer for theater and ballet. He made designs for perfumes, cosmetics, hosiery, and ties. So there's that Taurian connection to luxury and Venusian objects there. He also created jewelry such as the Royal Heart, which had gold, rubies, diamonds, emeralds, and according to Wikipedia, was created in such a way that the center beats like a heart. And the Wikipedia article also had a quote from him which mentioned his love of everything that is gilded and excessive. And then also, this is his passion for luxury. Those were both from the article. And those are also both very Taurian phrases and characteristics. So he talks about how he and his wife lived this extravagant lifestyle. He also wrote a novel about this group of extravagantly wealthy aristocrats, and there's like a love affair. So you can feel this Taurus energy coming out in a lot of ways, which you would expect with four majorly important personal planets in Taurus. So, multiple sources online mentioned his determined, steady pursuit of excellence, how incredibly skilled he was technically at his craft, that master craftsman idea. Wikipedia mentions him going to a museum every week to analyze the old masterpieces there, how he loved a particular museum for his entire life. So, that like Taurian energy of like, I love this one thing, I will love it forever. Why do I need to go to a different museum? This is the museum that I love, that sort of idea. He was Taurus craftsman. In 1948, he published a book called 50 Secrets of Magic Craftsmanship. He was inspired by both traditional and modern artists and used both traditional and avant-garde techniques. But it's worth pointing out that with an I think it's 8:45 a.m. birth time. I'm not sure how reliable that is, but even if it's there, then his moon is in Aries. So for the bulk of the day, his moon would have fallen in Aries. So he probably had that moon in Aries. And so that like aspect of like trying new things could come out a little bit for him. Like it sort of balances out that Taurian refusal to try new things and change. But he also made other kinds of art, such as sculptures and engravings, which are both very down to earth and hands on and physical kinds of art. He was known for his shocking stunts, of course, which perhaps could be that moon in Aries. And one thing that Wikipedia talked about was how at the 1939 New York World's Fair, Dali debuted his Dream of Venus Surrealist Pavilion. So first of all, that name, Dream of Venus, right? And we're talking about Taurus here. But this pavilion, which was located in the amusements area of the exposition, featured bizarre sculptures, statues, mermaids, and live nude models and costumes made of fresh seafood, which, very physical, very like having to do with the senses, right? And then there's also the like down to earth aspect of the like sculptures and nude models, but then also that like food coming in there also, which is kind of funny. Um, Another anecdote shows that bull in a china shop energy that like some of the modern astrology books that I've read have like referred to Taurus as the bull in the china shop. But when Taurus is brought to anger, it's formidable. It doesn't get angry super easily, but once it's there, watch out. So it's like here's an example, when in 1938 changes were made to his work without his approval, he pushed a bathtub through a window. So there you have it. Um, there was also a mention in an article on biography.com about Dali that he would have angry outbursts as a child. He was very stubborn. He was actually kicked out of an art school because he refused to accept that any of the staff was qualified to give him the exams. So that is Salvador Dali with a whole huge Taurus stellium. All right, so now we're going to look at John Muir, who had his sun in Mercury in Taurus, but Venus was in Pisces. So John Muir was a naturalist, a conservationist. He founded the Sierra Club for Environmental Conservation and helped to preserve and protect Yosemite and Sequoia National Park. So if you think about like that Taurian connection to the earth and that like real appreciation of the physical and the things that we can touch and see and feel and hear, and how like nature is so powerful and healing and important for this Taurus earth sign that is so present in the moment, and then you combine that with this Venus and Pisces like that urge to like make the world better, to help in like this big picture way, and he did just that like for nature. So um his writings were influential in motivating the government to set aside protected national forests. He didn't actually enjoy writing from what I read. He found it tedious, but he still wrote so much. It's like he worked really hard to be able to have the impact that he did, and he did over the course of decades. And he kept doing this thing that he didn't even necessarily enjoy, because it was important to him to be able to protect nature. So he grew up working long, hard days on a farm. He also started making inventions such as clocks he carved out of wood, an invention that tipped him out of bed. I thought that was kind of a funny little anecdote for someone with this Taurus and Pisces combination, just like wanting to stay in bed and sleep away the day. But so he creates this invention that will just tip him out of bed. And I love that. Um, and in the 1860s, it said he even walked 1,000 miles as part of a couple decades worth of travel around the world. And he sailed to other countries as well. So this like really, really long walk that feels very Taurian, and then sailing around the world that feels very Piscean. So kind of a funny combination. He worked hard for many years to reach his goals, decades of effort, tons of books and articles that he wrote before he was able to meet with Teddy Roosevelt and advocate for federal control of natural lands to preserve them. Um, from Wikipedia, according to author William Anderson, Muir exemplified the archetype of our oneness with the earth. And I love that for this Taurus Pisces combination, because Taurus can be such an earthy sign and so connected to nature, but then Pisces is generally associated with being like one with everyone else. So that oneness with the earth is like such a great Taurus Pisces combination phrase. Um, and then Wikipedia also goes on to say that biographer Donald Worster says he believed his mission was saving the American soul from total surrender to materialism. And like that can be a shadow side to Taurus, that materialism. But obviously, so many people with Taurus placements like can see that. Like they can like feel that urge and then they can like rise above it. Um, and sometimes the things that are like within us that could be like our greatest challenges or the things that we have to like fight against within ourselves. Not cravings, I can't think of the word. Are like inclinations that we know aren't good for us or the world, basically. Um, that those things can be the things that we can become best at fighting because we know that it doesn't help the individual nor does it help the collective. So that would be John Muir with Sun and Mercury in Taurus and Venus in Pisces. All right, so next we're going to look at Katharine Hepburn, who had her Sun and Mercury in Taurus and Venus in Aries. So she was an actress, and one of the first things that Wikipedia says about her is that she was known for her headstrong independence, which is, I think, a great phrase summarizing the combination of Taurus and Aries. It also goes on to say that she had an on-screen and public persona of a strong-willed and sophisticated woman. So again, that Taurus really coming through just in like the basic first description of her. Her beginning in acting actually got off to kind of a rough start. She was fired several times and really had to persevere and work hard to improve. So that Taurus work ethic is really coming through here. And then also, Wikipedia talks about how the 4 years after she graduated college, between 1928 to 1932, she was not only fired several times, but she had multiple people tell her she just wasn't good enough. And yet she kept trying. She would respond to this by getting lessons. Like when she was told her voice was too shrill, she signed up for voice lessons. Or if she was told she wasn't good enough, she found a drama coach. So she really put the work in. She had the determination. And her career was full of these ups and downs. She would like really be making it big, like really be very popular, and then something would happen and she would lose some of that popularity and she would have to sort of fight to gain it back. And she always countered these hard times with that hard work, dedication. Her career was really long. Like she really stuck with it no matter what. I think she's a great example of the hard work and determination to master a craft and to succeed that you can find in Taurus. With her Venus in Aries, you don't get that same traditionalist attitude that we saw with Dali. In fact, one of the reasons that her popularity suffered for a little while was her progressive attitudes, especially in regard to communism. And the but overall, the Taurian endurance and work ethic and refusal to give up or change paths no matter what, just sticking with it, that definitely is the Taurus shining through for Katharine Hepburn. All right, so the next person we're going to look at is Joe Louis, who is an American boxer. He had his Sun and Mercury in Taurus and his Venus in Gemini. And right off the bat, I just want to say that, like, to me, the combination of Taurus and Gemini with boxing is like such a great fit because you have like that, like, strong, sturdy aspect to Taurus and that like brute force, but then Gemini is like light on its feet, and there's also that two-ness to Gemini, like the two fists, the 2 feet, like moving. I don't know. It just really works for me. But anyway, so we have Joe Louis. So he's an American boxer who competed in the 1930s and 40s, and according to Wikipedia, he had the longest single reign of champion of any boxer in history. And that right there, that Taurus ability to just like be in for the long haul, like when we talked about how in the Aries video that Aries can be more of the sprinter, like Taurus can be that marathoner, right? So Joe Louis spoke very little until he was 6, which is interesting with the Mercury in Taurus and how slow moving Taurus can be, and also how Taurus like does things when it's ready to. But then, like, despite that slow start in speech, when it came to communication, he ended up having like several powerful slogans, like things that he said that ended up like being repeated throughout time. And um that like kind of became catchphrases for him so that he ended up having this like powerful voice in the public in a way as he got older. So like when they asked him how he felt about joining the segregated army, and he said, lots of things wrong with America, but Hitler ain't going to fix them. Or he also said about the war, World War II, we'll win because we're on God's side. And actually the government even started using that as a recruitment slogan. So he had this like way of very succinctly summing up an idea that would really resonate with the people. So he was a powerful fighter with an incredible record who was able to sustain that power and success longer than anyone. And according to Wikipedia, he had only 3 losses in his 69 professional fights. He tallied 52 knockouts and held the championship from 1937 to 1949, the longest span, as we talked about. So he started boxing at 17 and he lost, but then obviously he built his way up. And when he lost his first match against Max Schmeling, I think is how you say it, a German fighter in 1936, even though the following year he won the title of world champion, he said that he didn't want to be called champion until he could beat Max. So it's kind of funny like that, like stubbornness and that like determination to succeed. And he didn't care if they were saying he's world champion. He hadn't beat that one guy, so he was going to try to beat him first. So the following year, he had a rematch and he was like super prepared for it. And he beat him easily, totally crushed him. So um, it was also like a historic match. And Wikipedia said it was it's widely regarded as one of the most significant boxing matches in history, one of the most historic sports events of all time. And it was the first time that many white Americans openly cheered for a black man against a white opponent. So that is Joe Louis, that determination to succeed, that slow start with the speech with the Mercury and Taurus that turned into these like powerful words that he could just like sum up really succinctly. That feels very Taurian to me also. And then also his ability to be able to move quickly while also having that like power, and then also that endurance over a period of time, being able to hold that title for so long. That all of that speaks to me. Next, we're going to look at Melanie Thornton, who had her Sun and Mercury in Taurus and then Venus in Cancer. And I didn't actually know much about her beforehand, and I read this little biography that her sister wrote, so that is a source for pretty much everything I have about her, but there was quite a bit in there, and it all fit really well. So she was a singer from the Eurodance group La Bouche. Her sister wrote this biography and describes how from the very young age, Melanie was obsessed with music, dance, piano lessons. She wanted voice lessons when she was 9, but she had to ask her parents for 2 years in order to get them. She The sister mentions that her stubbornness was really intense. She mentioned that several times in the biography. She also played the clarinet. As she grew into a teenager, she really wanted to have nice, like pretty clothes, especially for performances. So she started sewing them herself and designing them herself, which I think is a real nod to that Taurian creativity also, but that love of nice things and wanting to have what she liked. So she would make her own clothes so she could have exactly what she wanted. And her father died when she was a teenager. And Melanie's sister said that her reaction to that grief was to immerse herself in her practice, in her music, which also feels very Taurian to me, to work hard to um, work through something. So Melanie Thornton moved to Germany to be near her sister and her uncle, and because her uncle had connections for her in the music world. When her band formed, they named it La Bouche, French for the mouth, partly because she had to get some dental work to keep her agent happy. But anyway, another part of it, and the reason that they were able to convince her to go with this name for the band, was because the manager told her that she had this powerful booming voice that came out of her mouth, and that to me feels very Taurian. Um, he convinced her to go along with the name, and even in Germany, performing and getting standing ovations and being a huge hit, she still continued to make her own dresses. So she really held on to that aspect. And her Cancer Venus comes into play, I think, with her strong value for an attachment to her family. She chose to move to Germany because her sister and her uncle were there. And then her sister mentioned her at other points having trouble stepping out of her comfort zone, but that it was her sister who was able to reassure her. And in fact, when her sister moved back to the States and Melanie was still in Germany, and when she needed a new manager, she called her sister up and asked her to move back to Germany to be her manager. So she was really all about family and keeping these people she was close to like really tight around her. And when her sister moved to Germany to be manager, Melanie would also ask her to cook old favorite meals from when they were growing up, which to me feels very Taurian also. So other things that Melanie's sister says about her in her biography: she was usually very cautious about entering new relationships. Once she was in them, she was very affectionate, loved to shower her partner with gifts. That feels very Taurus to me. and that she was creative in many ways, not just with her singing and her clothes designing and making, but also she liked to paint, crochet, write poetry. And just going to end it on this. She said it always took her a long time to get ready because she hated to be rushed. So there's Taurus for you. Now we're going to look at Leonardo da Vinci, who had his sun in Venus in Taurus and then Mercury in Aries. So this is the first one where it isn't the sun and Mercury in Taurus together, but rather the sun and Venus in Taurus. So Leonardo da Vinci, according to Wikipedia, he was born out of wedlock, probably raised by his father's family on his father's estate. He showed such artistic talent at a young age. His education ended up primarily focused on that. So that like early artistic ability showing up again for another Taurus person. He showed that promise and then began working as an apprentice to artist Verrocchio, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say it, at age 15. There he learned all these different techniques, and you could imagine that he was probably very dedicated to that craft and very determined simply based on the mastery he was able to achieve throughout his life. Um, Britannica describes his public persona as gracious, reserved, and elegant, which I think really fits for Taurus also. And it mentions that throughout his life, he set boundless goals for himself, which definitely shows that Taurus determination. He worked in many different ways. He was worked as a painter, sculptor, technical advisor, architectural expert, called to analyze the foundation of a damaged church, which I think very Taurian vibes there, because they're all about like building foundations and also that creativity and that ability to seek stability. I don't know. It all fits for architectural expert trying to analyze the foundation of a damaged church. And also because of that traditional aspect of Taurus too. So there's a lot of that being pulled in there. He also worked creating topographical maps, which I think is a great manifestation of that combination of the natural world with the art. So Wikipedia, this is right from Wikipedia. Among the qualities that make Leonardo's work unique are his innovative techniques for laying on the paint, his detailed knowledge of anatomy, light, botany, and geology, his interest in physiognomy and the way humans register emotion and expression and gesture, his innovative use of the human form and figurative composition, and his use of subtle gradation of tone. And there's a real focus on observing and understanding the physical world and nature, humans included, in this description of his skills. Because you think about like all those different things that he was an expert on and that he was so good at being able to analyze and then recreate that botany, geology, anatomy, like it's so based in the natural world. So some of his major works, The Last Supper, one of the most famous meals of all time. And, Taurus is sort of got this funny stereotype, but it's pretty true of really loving food. So that's kind of funny. But anyway, that's just a silly aside. The writer Matteo Bandello observed Leonardo at work while he was working on this and said that sometimes he would paint from dawn till dusk without stopping to eat and then not paint for 3 or 4 days at a time. So really that like hard work ethic, that dedication, that like stubbornness, refusal to take a break. So um, then there's also Lady with an Ermine. That's another painting that he made. And it shows this woman holding this animal that's so it looks so soft. It's like the softness of it and the texture and this like combination of like bringing that like sense of physical touch. Like you can almost like feel this animal when you look at the painting and then like nature being brought into the portrait. That feels very Taurian to me also. And the Mona Lisa, obviously, he worked on that for like over a decade. So like he didn't even give it to the people he made it for. So he carried it around with him. He kept working on it. And so there's like that like long haul aspect for his work on this painting, but then also like if you look at the Mona Lisa and you like check out this like vivid natural landscape in the background, like it's really startling and dramatic, and it again shows his focus on like the natural world. And then let's see, Virgin and Child with St. Anne was also another painting that had that gorgeous background landscape. He also is known for his journals. Wikipedia says over 13,000 pages of art and natural philosophy. So that again, there's that Taurus dedication to becoming a master at your craft. And for him, that was both art and the natural world and trying to master both, and especially in combination. I think that having Mercury in Aries adds up when you think about like how quick his mind was, but also like his many inventions and wanting to be the first to create things and that like obsession with like humans in flight and like different things like that. It feels very Aries. And he was also, according to Britannica, he mentioned that it mentions that the theme of his studies was knowing how to see. And since Aries is associated with eyesight and then Mercury and like how we know things, I think that Aries and Mercury and his like focus on knowing how to see, I think is really spot on and super fun. Now we're going to look at Theo Van Gogh, who was Vincent van Gogh's brother. And I just want to go over this one really quickly, but I love this for showing the Taurus dependability because Theo was like the rock for his brother, and he helped him not only in the art world and not only financially but also like emotionally, and they wrote hundreds of letters to each other, and he was like the person that Vincent could turn to when he needed help. And even like when Vincent van Gogh was saying that he wanted to pay his brother back and his brother like wouldn't hear, if he's like, all I want is for you to be able to not worry about it. So just showing that like Taurus determination. Also, he was involved in the art world too as an art dealer. So like that like connection to the arts is there too. And then having that Mercury in Gemini, probably like if he was born, I think like before like 2 a.m., then it would have still been in Taurus, but like, the Taurus is shining through pretty clearly anyway. Because he has Venus, Sun, and Mars all there. So, but I think the birth chart was rated as a B rating and it said 330. So we're just going to go with the Mercury and Gemini. And I think that that really fits also for all of those letters that he was writing to his brother and like how being known for this, profuse output of words and that like he was offering his support in one way through these letters also. All right, now just quickly some correspondences for Taurus. That's how I'm going to end this video. So for tarot cards, every zodiac sign has one major arcana card associated with it. And for Taurus, that's the Hierophant. And it also has, every zodiac sign also has three minor arcana cards in addition to a court card. So the court card would be the Knight of Pentacles. And that's because the knights represent the fixed signs. Pentacles is earth. So fixed earth, you get the Knight of Pentacles. And then the 5 to 7 of Pentacles represent the three decans of Taurus. So crystals for increasing Taurus energy, tree agate for stability, abundance, inner strength, perseverance, green jade for inner strength, peace, stability, fertility, and abundance, emerald for abundance, creativity, and confidence, pyrite for wealth, determination, and willpower, lepidolite for patience and peace, hematite for stability and resilience, malachite for inner strength, creativity, and personal growth, and rose quartz for patience and romance. And then you have crystals for balancing Taurus energy, carnelian for counteracting procrastination or indecision, fluorite for decision making and self discipline, bloodstone for motivation and courage, moonstone for navigating change, letting go, hormonal issues, fire agate for letting go of past attachments, rose quartz for letting go of past hurts and for self love, Botswana agate for navigating change, and smoky quartz for grounding and letting go of the past. The more Taurus correspondences, and these are just correspondences that resonate for me, so everybody can come up with what works for them. Also, just some ideas. So plants for increasing Taurus energy: cinnamon for prosperity, love, and inner strength; basil for love, fertility, and abundance; mint for abundance, love, and fertility; dandelion for perseverance, creativity, grounding; pine for persistence, resilience, and prosperity; chickweed for love and persistence; cloves for love and prosperity; ginger for creativity, prosperity, and inner strength; motherwort for emotional stability, fertility, and love; and then plants for balancing Taurus energy: borage for courage and taking action; thyme for courage, energy, and decisiveness; oregano for clarity, letting go, and easing worries; lemongrass for clarity, energy, and communication. And then colors I associate with Taurus are green and pink. Thank you so much for watching my video about Taurus. I hope that it was interesting and that you learned a couple things. If you have any comments or questions or anything you'd like to add, I'd love to hear it. And stay tuned. I'm definitely going to make a Gemini video next month when that comes around. And I have a bunch of other things planned. I'm thinking about some interesting midpoint videos. So yeah, keep watching.